All right. Well, welcome. Episode 11 of the Blueprint Tour by Permit Zip. Trying to make the small project market scalable. If you want to check out the instant quote on our website, go ahead and do that. You can get a price in seconds. We try to make things easy. Ben uses that. He's one of the early adopters. But yeah, I know. He's a good guy. We like him too. We're here with Ben Matthews from Metro Electric. We are talking about coordination, and he's actually one of the most artful of the folks that we know in the world of coordination. Specifically, I think it's your vibe. You can almost like deliver anything to anybody, no matter the news, and they're like, all right.
Well, I'm not sure about that. But.
Yeah. So how long have you been at Metro? It seems like you've been there. It's like you've made an awesome career out of it, you know?
Yeah, 2006. So pretty much started with them right out of high school.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh.
And
I didn't know that.
I always tell people the smartest engineer I know is Ben Matthews. Because you don't have a license you're not a licensed professional engineer. Do you have your trade?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. I didn't know that. I was wondering because if you didn't, then that would just be superhuman. Like the amount that you know and how much you understand the code and construction, to me, is unreal. Ben, again, is we talked to Jeff before, Jeff Consro. He's one of the folks that when in my early career saved my ass because he knew what he was doing. And while we were learning as we were, getting it, and you're the same way. You've basically one of the earlier people, I think one of the first few people that actually used their instant quote when that came along.
Yeah, it was awesome. You could put in the square footage, put in what it was, and you get a quote back. You don't have to send an email and 10 follow-ups.
Talk to a human.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're trying to get back onto focusing on those kind of tools ourselves. We've gone through a lot of like identity crises along the way, just figuring out how to reprioritize what people actually value. But on the coordination front, what we're realizing is that everybody kind of knows it's important generally, but then there's a very different perspective of each person's thought on who should be doing what kind of coordination. And so how do you approach it? Just, when you look at a drawing, I know you've talked about many engineers being like, that's just not going to fit, those kind of things. So walk me through what is your process when you start pricing and making sure things actually get built right?
Yeah, so I think it depends on the project. If it's new construction, I think there's a higher level of expectation for coordination. If it's existing, it's like, well, it was existing. We weren't allowed to do a tour. And if we could, we couldn't, survey the entire site to see how everything fits and what all the existing conditions are. And different contractors, different jobs have different requirements for coordination. I'd say ours is usually, I would say probably simpler as long as the light fixture goes where it's supposed to, and as long as the panel fits, that, the in-between stuff, we can usually work around.
Mm-hmm. I always think it's amazing that the electrical designers get a pass on all of the conductors just magically getting from point A to point B for the most part.
Oh, here comes the grumpy mechanical guy.
Yeah, I'm the mechanical engineer now, so now I'm y'all's worst nightmare. But these conduits, I think we actually specifically put a little bit of thought into it on this project, right?
Absolutely.
These ones?
We put thought into every conduit on every project, Kim.
Yeah. Well, like multifamily. Do you guys do a lot of multifamily? No. Okay, yeah. There's so... I've walked in those sites and see like a 200-unit multifamily, and this sheer mass of all of those SC cables that have to go somewhere, we'd never, ever think about it. It just gets done, and I'm like, holy shit, I guess we should probably be aware of how large this is.
God forbid you guys have one ductwork running.
Yeah, but and I have one 4x4 duct that just happens to go against a freaking sprinkler pipe that I didn't know existed. Yeah, then suddenly the mechanical engineer fucked it up, messed it up. Sorry, LinkedIn or whoever the rules are.
It's got a flag on YouTube.
What is that? I think I can do that. Mechanical engineer fucking
You're going to have to work on that.
I really need to practice on that.
Timing is way off.
Anyway, so when you went right out of high school into this, what does the education path look like? What is it like getting into the trades from there? Because, I'm a college guy situation, piano, then college for actual engineering. But how difficult is it, like working and getting that education all at the same time? What does that look like?
It depends. So a lot of high schools, like a lot of like counties have trade programs that are like tech programs you can get into. So I did one. So I was able to our apprenticeship is 4 years. I was able to do the tech program, shave a year off. So when I got out, I only had 3 years.
How many hours do you have to commit to that a week?
The schooling or the
Schooling.
schooling? It's so different companies have different programs that they're a part of. So the one that we do is pretty much follows the normal like school calendar.
Yeah.
And it's 2 nights a week for I think 3 hours, and each night's like 6 hours a week of like in the classroom, and then you might have a little bit of homework or something. But the majority of your training is in the field, 40 hours a week, plus getting your field training.
I think we get that feedback a lot from the field folks. Is that, man, I wish engineers had more field experience.
Yeah, it probably would be helpful for you guys.
Definitely helpful. A couple of years ago when Richmond was doing those third-party inspections, we got to go on a couple, and that was the best thing that I could have done was see the rough ends before the walls go up. It was super helpful.
Yeah, that I was doing U.S. embassies before this, so I never saw anything I designed. I was just so decoupled from it, and so everything was in a different country with all types of weird restrictions that people would tell me about. Oh, well, we can locally source labor to precast the manholes or the handholes. I didn't know what any of that meant or what it even looked like in the slightest. So, at least in the in the local market, we can at least see some of it, right?
Yeah.
But we just don't build it as much. But on the same, we've talked about it a lot. Like, it's not common that somebody like you comes along that knows the construction and the code so well. Like for those that are listening, we called Ben randomly on our drive the other day and just tested him on his code knowledge, and he cited the code chapters verbatim. What was it? 220?
Yeah, 220. Well, I said low calcs, but you said the whole entire name.
Yeah,
branch circuit and feeders. So.
Yeah, you said the whole thing verbatim, the actual title. That's not normal for anybody that has that knowledge, let alone somebody who's a master of the trade as well. I mean, are you just, is that part of your schooling, or is it just like you've made the commitment to dig into it like that?
I think it's somewhat unique. I mean, like when I was in going through the apprenticeship, and in the field, didn't have I used the code because we have to install things per code. But then once I got kind of out of the field in the office, I started doing a lot of design stuff.
Yeah.
Because we'll do small projects in-house in our office, where we're drawing the drawings and anything that doesn't need an engineer stamp for tiny things that the localities may want a drawing for. So I think a lot of it's just picked up from doing that over and over and over again, just getting your drawings sent back with
just doing your own design build in house and having to just be forced to be that much more adjacent to the code. I mean, and it's not that the trades aren't familiar with the code, it's just it's not as common to be as familiar as you are with it. That's usually what engineers spend most of our time doing. And so I mean, you've called me many times on just code questions where I'm like, open it up while you're calling me to try to like read it before you finish the question so I can pretend I'm knowledgeable on it. It's just always some nuanced key element of it. But back to coordination, just generally, code understanding helps quite a bit, but really what's lacking, I think, on engineers is physically understanding how large these things are. I mean, it can take an engineer 20 years before they start to get pretty good at it. And a trade person, after 2 years of doing it, it gets really good at understanding the spatial relationship between everything, where we've been talking about a lot. Engineers stay in the abstract. We're very theoretical about just load distribution, how are we doing the load calculations, how big does the bus rating have to be, all of that stuff. And then it's not necessarily an afterthought, but it feels like it probably to you that the arrangement of the equipment is an afterthought. How do you approach that when you see the conflict on like, this isn't going to work?
I mean, I'd say it depends on what it is and how significant it is. If it's like, a lot of engineers, the circuiting is something that drives a lot of the foremen crazy because they're like, I've got 2 rooms next to each other. One's coming out of panel A and one's coming out of panel B. And so we just make the change and we redline it in the as-builts because it's not worth going back to you guys and being like, can we do this? Because it's like, well, this panel has 100 amps out of 200 and this one has 70 out of 200. I don't think 3 amps on this circuit's going to make or break that panel either way. But if it's significant, like, we have to shift around half the light fixtures we have to move exit signs, like stuff like that, where we're like, you know, the engineer who drew this is going to need to weigh in on whether we can actually do this or not.
Yeah, you know, 3 air handlers with like 10 kW strip heat on it or something that needs to be on the panel that's 10 feet away from them instead of 3 stories below on the first floor. You know, it's hard when you have a team and there's juniors and they're just learning the software, they're learning all these things, the practical application of it, and it's hard to manage it, that quality assurance, just those simple, obvious things that in hindsight, when you see it, like, man, that doesn't make sense. But we're hyper focused on, are these loads accurate? 220, you know, does its bus size right? And then we'll miss something so obvious, like a panel board with circuits on a different floor going to it. It's just, I don't even know how to, other than just don't let junior people ever do anything, you know, how to stop that. You know?
One of the things I learned about circuiting, I think you told me this, was we'll usually like circuit one room on one circuit, another room on the other circuit, like 2 offices side by side, but it actually makes a whole lot more sense to have that shared wall be on the same circuit. Because you got 2 receptacles on this wall in this room and 2 receptacles on this wall in this room, and they're running along the same wall. If those are on the same circuit, that makes it a whole lot easier. So we've been trying to make little changes like that.
What's the biggest miss you see from engineers?
Ooh. Hot seat.
Don't worry, I'm an engineer. You can go in.
Us included.
No, let's say from primitive engineers.
I think it really just depends. I will say our biggest usual like hang up on projects is lighting and lighting controls. So if I had to pick something, I would say it's the lighting control design from what is the engineer asking for, practically what exists.
Great minds.
And then how do we actually make those 2 things work together? That's probably the biggest always hurdle when bidding a project, or even after you've been awarded it, doing it. It's like, okay, well, this is, you know, and engineers have different philosophies on that. Some engineers are like, whatever I put on my drawings is what you're doing. And some engineers are like, well, that's really just like a basis of design. Like, as long as you meet the criteria that I'm looking for, I don't really care how you do it. So it's hard to know which direction to go.
That just, I think, comes down mostly, aside potentially on some ego things that may come into play, it just mostly would be a function, I think, of the scope, what the budget was for the engineer to do. For us, when we do like commercial, there's just not the budget for us to really articulate anything other than a general description of where we want occupancy sensors. And then there's left this big scope gap about how's it going to get done? Like, what are the details of the controls? And we would be like, I don't know, you know, and that could be frustrating, but it's, you know, our pricing in the smaller commercial market can be so thin that if we included all of that detail work, then we're going to now be asked about all of those questions about all of that detail work, and it starts to compound. And then you end up basically babysitting, I guess, the lighting control design. What do you do in that situation? Do you lean on the rep? Cuss my name out? I mean,
no, I mean, you kind of have to know, like, the engineer that do the drawings, and different engineers have different reputations, and we know what they are. So some of that is just known, like, hey, this guy is going to want it to be exactly. He's not going to accept anything other than what he's got on the drawings. And some of them are a little bit more lenient, and you just kind of have to kind of feel it out and know. And you do have to lean on the reps for some of that design piece of it, to help, you know, make sure that in the end the job is covered and functional. Yeah, it's just getting there is challenging sometimes.
That's interesting. You know, what we've found, I think a gap for us then would be not getting the rep in our conversations. They often are directly communicating with the architect. And then we just kind of get given a cut sheet list or something. And maybe if we were there in the conversation, back, who is going to be in charge of your controls, and make sure the controls are articulated clearly for bid. We won't maybe put it on our drawings, but let's at least put it as an assisted package when it goes out to bid. We can refer to them. Say, you'll answer all these questions about it, but I can say it'll be done in this way with this general design basis, refer to some other third-party package, and this is who you contact maybe. I don't know. That's a tough one to do when we don't have it in scope.
Yeah. And I mean, the other thing too is, like, the best way we see it done is you have the architect working with 1, maybe 2 lighting reps.
Yeah.
But then sometimes that doesn't happen. And so you'll have like 6 lighting reps, and then it's just chaos.
How much of your time goes into selecting fixtures that people can actually afford?
A lot. Like, you know, lighting is pretty much the the easiest, quickest thing to cut back on.
Yeah.
Just because it's there's so many different manufacturers and different price points that a lot of the changes you visually can't even see, but it'll save you $20 a fixture.
How much are we talking order of magnitude on large lighting package? We start at X dollars and then you can get it down to Z.
I mean, it really just depends. Like if you have a lighting package that comes in and it's, 1,200 square feet and it's $60,000, you can cut a lot.
Yeah.
But if it's $4,000, obviously,
Yeah.
there isn't much, to go from. So it really just depends on the project and what the end result that they're looking for. Because some people don't want to skimp on the lighting. They're like, no, I want what the architect has visualized, and I don't care. I'll pay for it.
Yeah.
So
That's a huge service.
If it turns on,
I know, right?
and it dims like where we need it to, and it doesn't catch on fire, it's good for me.
Are there and then there's the occupant sensor stuff that ends up being kind of annoying for everybody. And I've heard the word on the street is sometimes people will, disabled occupancy sensors.
No.
Yeah, I've heard that. And sometimes I've heard people shut off the fresh air into the units, the HVAC as well. Following the code is a funny dance because, or the switching of the receptacle thing, I think that's energy code. Is that now on the ICC or is that going to be?
I don't know if it is yet, but it's some of these, and some of the codes too are like they have good intention, but like, we did a job where they had, I think it was the Asher energy code they were using, and so they wanted the receptacles half switched.
Yeah.
So they put a duplex that was switched and then put a regular one right next to it. So they made it a quad.
Yeah.
Yes, you met the code, but you're not like, no one's going to plug into that outlet. So
As soon as they figure out if it's shutting their stuff off automatically, they're just going to get
This
one of
thing's
these little
broke.
adapters and plug in
And
everything.
just move the plugs on the computer from this one to this one.
What's going on with this?
So it's weird that, you have to spend the money to get that control functionality, and then you automatically have created a bypass.
Yeah.
So in the end, the whole point of this is to save energy and save, potentially energy usage, but you're never going to get there. And some of it too is, if your controls and your energy stuff is so expensive, you'll never see that recoup in energy costs, especially in Virginia where energy costs are pretty low. So sometimes it's kind of foolish, some of the stuff that gets thrown out there to do.
Daylight harvesting is one. North Carolina completely struck that from their state version of the energy code. It's not required at all.
Yeah. Yeah. We looked at that. We're like, wait, what? I guess North Carolina was like, whatever.
Fuck
Yeah,
daylight
I
harvesting.
think they say use LEDs or something, but the entire energy code is pretty much stricken. We've gotten rid of a lot of solar requirements in the U.S. I mean, in the Virginia code actually too. All the like pathways you're supposed to reserve for the firemen through the solar panels have been removed as a requirement, at least in the 2018 code. I guess in favor of being able to put more solar on the roof. But yeah, so what about between trades? What's the most difficult thing to get right that ends up being like a pissing match?
I think it's very job specific, but I'd say usually the HVAC electrical coordination is probably the biggest one because it's the most impactful to us. So the HVAC contractor will get a hold of a design and they'll be like, hey, I don't want to use these units because they have a long lead time, or hey, I don't want to use these units because they're X amount of dollars more. We're going to go with this alternate package. And so we don't see it sometimes ever until it's installed. And sometimes, a lot of contractors will give us submittals, and it's either, a lot of times it's like, well, yeah, it was $10,000, but you went from 100 amps to 200 amps. So here's your $12,000 change order.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so no one saved anything there except for the HVAC contractor's price looked better.
Yeah. He saved 10 grand and it cost 20,000 to accommodate the 10.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's the best way to approach that? Knowing these breakers are potentially going to swing between 30 and 50 amps or whatever based on what's bought, or if they suddenly add strip heat, do you just rough an empty conduit and wait?
No. So, I mean, our approach is we bid off the drawings, and then usually these are issues that come up like during submittal review. So we will usually do our submittal of our gear and have a note on it that says, we cannot release anything without plumbing and HVAC approved submittals. That at least starts a conversation with the general contractor, like, hey, what do you need that for?
Yeah.
Or, because you guys a lot of times are usually the comments we see from most engineers are, you need to coordinate this between the two trades. We're not stepping in the middle. You guys have deviated from our design. We had it coordinated on the front end. You guys have changed things. Now it's on you to coordinate. And that's fair. So usually that's the comment back. If the engineer will, usually on the HVAC side, they'll flag it and say, hey, this isn't what we designed. You need to coordinate your overcurrent protection with the electrical. So then we just present it to the general contractor and we say, hey, here are your options. You can wait for approved drawings in HVAC, and every day you wait's pushing your lead time release, your gear release for lead times. Or you can roll the dice and see what happens. And, you kind of have to gamble whether you're more concerned about their cost or whether you're more concerned about your timeline. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Ben's always got that note on the submittals.
Yeah.
Every time I see a submittal come through from Ben, it's right there. I only have to write it, and it's already there on the first page. Everyone.
Yep. What's the most common? So for electrical, I think the most involved we might get with laying things out, obviously, I think is equipment. What's the biggest oversight you see in electrical engineers and designers when they're just trying to lay out equipment? What's the biggest blind spot?
I think on the smaller projects, it's usually pretty simple for us, but on bigger projects, especially when you have electrical rooms that have got a ton of gear in it, is just clearance requirements in electrical room. And some of that's challenging for you guys too, because you may spec a square D product, and square D, the lead times or the cost drove it out of possibility. So now we're going with an ABB product and it's twice the size.
Yeah.
So how would you know?
Yeah. Yes.
So then, on our end, we help to try and redraw the electrical room. And, in essence, what we try to do is just offer a suggestion or an idea for approval for the engineer, so they don't have to sit there and do all that work.
Yeah.
We'll try and head some of that off to avoid issues.
You have a great way of approaching it too, where it's better designs, usually, certainly, and you might catch an issue here and there, and it's not the way that you would expect a traditional electrician to come at us. We see a lot of, if there's even the smallest little thing, that there's this trade battle going on with the engineers fucked it up again, and you will see it in the thread. The comments are this shit will never work or whatever, and it's it won't work, but there's a myriad of influencing factors here, like manufacturer changing or HVAC or that have varied from since design. So it's easy to look at it in that little instance and say, how could you ever have thought about it this way? But you've got a good way of just disarming everybody and welcoming the collaboration, I guess, and the ideas.
Yeah.
So I wish we had more of that, honestly.
Yeah.
There's I don't know. We were on the site yesterday or last week with Jacob, and this electrician was there.
Oh yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, you're doing your podcast?" I touched his stereo, and I said I didn't know who was there, and had to move it. And I saw him. He gave me the look. I'm like, "Hey, man, is this yours?" He's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Look, I didn't mean. I just had to move it. I hope you're okay with it." He said he was, right. But then I was like, he's like, "Oh, you're doing your podcast?"
I was told to stay out of the way.
Yeah. I was like, yeah, and he's like, what is it, by the way? I told him I'm the engineer. He's like, oh, I fucking hate you engineers. Y'all, and it's immediately into that, which is the perception. And then later we got, bullshit with each other and talking. It was a good chat. But then he ultimately said, y'all just think you're special and super smart, better than everybody because you got degrees and we don't. You think we're stupid. And I was like, I've never thought that in my entire life. In fact, the person that I regularly mention, who's the smartest engineer I know, is Ben Matthews.
Yeah.
I've never once thought disparagingly about the trades because they're extremely useful to us if we're a design partner the way you and I, or you and Carter now, when you guys work together. But there's just weird seed in the industry of almost kind of, they think they're better than us kind of vibe. Is it because engineers actually are that way?
So some engineers are that way, and I've had my experience with them, and usually I just let them dig their own hole.
Yeah.
I mean, it's had instances where, this engineer was dead set that this 45 kVA transformer couldn't go in the ceiling. So he wanted to put it outside. And I was like, that's okay. The customer was asking to save money. Here's a way we can put this transformer in the ceiling. And, oh no, this locality will never allow that. We've been burned before. And I was like, well, how about I just call the inspector? So I called him and he's like, yeah, no, it's fine. So I called him back and he's like, oh no, we're not going to do that. I'm like, all right, man, that's fine. I asked.
That's crazy.
And when the customer comes back to me, I'm going to tell them all of our conversation. So if you're prepared to defend yourself, against what the inspector at the locality where you're saying they're not going to allow it, it would be a direct. It's perfectly acceptable inside the code. So
Yeah.
just be prepared. And then we hung the transformer in the ceiling and saved them a lot of money. Because, and it's, and I've had same instances with like energy code stuff. Had to sit down because the client was upset about, it wasn't even necessarily a cost thing. It was like a functionality of the system that had been designed. And we had done phase 1 and we were getting to do phase 2. And so they were trying to make some changes. And this engineer was just adamant that, no, this is what's required. And I was like, look, man, we do these jobs all the time. This isn't required. Mm-hmm. And he's like, oh, and so I was like, so we're sitting here with the customer, me and him were going back and forth. And I was like, I can show you 10 jobs that we did in this building that don't have these requirements that we've completed within the past 2 years. Yeah. So if that's if that's what you want to say, that's fine. But don't say it's because it's a requirement. Just say it's because it's the way that you would like it designed, or it's your, design. But let's not throw the code or whatever locality under the bus, saying that it's, using that as a scapegoat to your design, which is way more expensive, and they don't like the functionality of it. Yeah, that there's no reference. He was just saying that can't work with no reference to a code interpretation that he had of something. He was pushing the ASHRAE energy code, which isn't required. Yeah, in Virginia, unless you're working federal government or something. Yeah. So that was what he was but he couldn't get he couldn't get around the idea that yes, per that code it's required, but that code's not required to be used. That is,
we've had AHJs do that before.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a whole nother. AHJs. How do you deal with them when they're doing the same thing?
That one's harder. Usually that
perfect response.
That one is usually very case by case, and but most of the HJs are willing to have conversations about it.
Yeah.
You can and sometimes the outcome of that is, hey, we don't agree. We're just gonna have to do it your way. And there are a lot of things in the code that, like one of the things we've run into recently is grouping of disconnects.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it's like, it's around the corner. You can literally, the only way you can't see it is if you're like inside of the disconnect and you're not able to look around. So let's back up real quick, and just so you can explain to people, because this is a perfect thing about coordination. Can you tell the folks listening what it is you're talking about, the code section, and then what we ran into, and how that was interpreted? Yeah, so the code requires that service disconnects be grouped, and that's it. It doesn't say, there are other instances in the code where it says it has to be within sight. And then they realized, in this warehouse that we're in right now, within sight, I can see from one end of this other 250,000 square foot warehouse. Yeah. So that isn't what they meant, so they qualified it to add a footage. But they haven't done that with disconnects, with services. Mm-hmm. So it's 100% up to the locality as to what they consider to be grouped. Mm-hmm. And so, some of the reason is because the footage is on this type of warehouse, our service stuff's usually spaced out over 30 feet because that's the amount of room it takes to get all the disconnects, CT cabinets, all that stuff. So, but some localities will accept it if it goes around the corner of a building. Like if you have one disconnect on one side of the corner, one on the other, they're literally within 3 feet of each other. Mm-hmm. What would you say the intent of that is? The requirement in the first place? Well, the intent is so that if the fire department shows up, the building's on fire, they need to be able to quickly turn off electricity so that they're not in harm's way while they're inside the building or fighting a fire. Putting water on electricity obviously is never a good idea. Mm-hmm. So that's the intent behind it. Mm-hmm. And that's supposed to be the way it's interpreted, is through the intent. And then if that's the intent, then if it's around the corner or something, they can still do that. It's not going to be hidden from them from view. It's not like they're not going to know that the equipment continues. If they're trained, I'm sure the first responders are trained how to identify how to de-energize the building. And so they're going to know, oh, there's something around the corner. I think in this situation, they required it to be physically touchable or something.
Yeah, we had to touch one.
I don't remember what they just said. It couldn't be around the corner, but I have had them where I've had another instance with the locality where there was an existing service and we had to add on to it, and there was a piece of HVAC equipment, and so we couldn't go on the other side of the piece of HVAC equipment. They were like, it's not grouped, and I'm like, well, you can literally stand there and it's like 3 feet in between them. And they were like, it's not grouped. So we had to get creative and found a solution, but they wouldn't budge. Like they were like, we don't consider that to be grouped. And it's like, I mean, all I can do is present it to you, take you out to the site, show you. And if your opinion is still, it's not grouped, then it's not grouped, and we got to come up with another solution.
Yeah. There's similar issues with the utility coordination, I think, where they write the rules, any utility, not just any particular one, but they write their own rules, and then they are the interpreter of those rules as well. So you can get in these situations where they are like, we had the utility tell us one time, we've told people all the time, there was like a 4-foot building right next to this transformer that they approved the location.
4-story.
4-story. What did I say?
4-foot building.
4 foot. I did that last time. A 4-story. It was this giant 4-foot building. A 4-floor building.
And 7.
The utility engineer was like, why don't you just move the building? We're like, okay, yeah. Well,
the location for the transformer has been planned for the last like 3 years and approved and everything.
We all looked at each other, like, couldn't tell, is this guy, is he serious right now? The transformer's sitting here in the 4 feet plus the other stories are also built. What are we going to do right here? You approved this location. And that's a tough one. And then everybody looks over at the engineer in particular, or maybe electrical, if it was a design build or something, or both of us if we work together. Like, why didn't y'all coordinate? Like, well, we don't have any authority over what they say. If they said it was okay one day and then change their mind the next.
Yeah.
Nothing we could do.
I mean, that is a challenge and different. I mean, like around here, there's really only one utility. But then if you venture not too far off, you can find another one. They all have their differences when you're dealing with them. But that is the biggest thing. It's like sometimes it's okay and sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
And it's hard to explain that to a customer. It's like, well, in this building, I have this. Well, when was your building built? 40 years ago. Okay, well,
yeah.
They've changed the rules since then. Well, I don't understand why. I want it this way. And it's like, well, let's see what we can do. So it is a challenge. It's a hard thing to navigate. And there aren't, like, even though there are supposed to be consistencies, you go to one area of town and you'll deal with this office and this is the way they do things. And then you go to another area and be like, well, this is how they do it. And they'll be like, well, no, we all do it the same. And I'm like,
no, you don't.
Then it should be the same. They're like, yeah, we do it the same. And I'm like, well, what's different? And they're like, no, it's the same.
Just start gaslighting you into thinking.
Okay.
No, it's the same.
Guess it is the same. I don't know.
You know what? The more you say it, the more I realize it's the same. Yep. That one's fun. What do you, how about internally, like for us engineers and having junior engineers, senior engineers, and just trying to scale and sometimes hire, listen, how difficult is it to educate and train and keep good people internally from a coordination of that?
I'd say our field guys, it's pretty easy because like there's a path. Like, so they start out as first year apprentices, and then they're working with other electricians. So by the time they're done, they've worked with more than one person. So they get a feel for the different, types of electricians that are out there, different types of work. So by the time they're actually in charge of something, they usually have at least 3 to 4 years of experience. And then even then they're on smaller projects that have, we also know who to supervise more. Like it doesn't, like the size of the project is important, but also like who's running that project and how much experience you have with that person to know what they need and how often you need to check on them and that kind of thing. So
is that just like a gut kind of feeling on like who needs more attention or what job they're on, or is there a system?
It really, I mean, a lot of times if someone gets to the point where they're in charge running work, it's really just about experience. So really like your guys that are just starting to run work, they're doing smaller jobs. We usually try to keep them closer to the office, smaller things, so that we can visit them regularly and just make sure that things are getting done correctly. And some of it has to do too with how much they're communicating with you. If you hear nothing, it's bad if they're new, because like people always have questions.
Yeah, that's true here too.
You have to, and some people just don't communicate as much as others. So if they're not communicating, then you have to be the one to go and
probe,
initiate the communication.
Yeah.
Like, hey, how's this going? Have you started on this? Did you run into this yet? And then if the answer's like no, you're like, site visit time.
Yeah.
Trust but verify. The benefit I think that you have in training and developing it is the feedback, the amount of feedback you have constantly daily as an individual learning in the field. You know immediately whether or not you did a good job bending that conduit and getting it to fit. Whereas we don't. We only know immediately whether or not a square box was drawn here or there, right? We don't find out until you may have already ordered the equipment and it becomes a problem for us as like me personally, not just permits, but as an engineer and as a professional trying to learn how this works. I don't get feedback. And I mean, especially if you're like embassy design that I was doing, it would go overseas. I would draw something and 2 years later, I'd find out whether or not it was a good design. Whereas when you're, I guess, I can only guess because I've only roughed in a couple wires with Carter at his house. We did allegedly. We pretended to do that work, but the conduit bending, getting things to work. I mean, I actually have done it before in my old studio, but immediately when you mess up, like the day, in the hour, in the second, in the moment that you do it, and every single day in the field, that, and you try to mount a panel, it doesn't work how you thought, and we have that completely vacant from our design and training. It's all theoretical book knowledge, and I think that leads to a lot of frustration because we're generally speaking, not every engineer, but generally speaking, the designers are less aware spatially of how things work in construction, even if we know what the code says about it.
And we're fortunate. It's a blessing and a curse. From that perspective, we're fortunate we do most of our work in Richmond because their reviewers are really smart, and they catch stuff other jurisdictions might not look at certain things, so we've gotten a lot of feedback from that review process basically for free from the city. So that's been a good learning opportunity. Yeah.
Rick Owens in the city, in the plumbing city, he was great, man.
Yeah.
He taught all of the plumbing engineers at our company how plumbing works. He was good. He knew it so well. I remember I asked him, I was like, do you have a checklist or something that keeps this together for you? He's like, yeah, it's right here. And he smacked the IPC.
All in his head.
I was like, damn. All right. But then there's, I don't know. You guys have a path, like you said. There's apprenticeship. Is that how it starts? How long is that?
If you do it straight through, it's 4 years.
And then what happens then?
So it depends. Not all of our, I wish all of our guys who started finished, but that just doesn't, for whatever reason, they either transfer to a different company or they decide that it's not what they want to do, or, you have to go to school. You can only miss so much time. So that usually is what gets a lot of people, is just missing time from school. But if you were to follow the program all the way through, by the time you're at the end of your third year, into your fourth year, you could be running work. And definitely by the end of your fourth year, you could be, if the personality works. Some people just don't want to be in charge. They don't want to have the responsibility. They want to just show up, do their thing, and go home. And that's okay. That's but they're still competent people. They can still be like, hey, I want you to go give them a task and they can do it. You don't have to sit there and watch them.
Yeah.
So they're underneath a foreman on a job of want you to go install the warehouse lights. And so they follow the plans, they can read the plans, they can go do it, and it's done, and you don't have to worry about it. But they don't want to be responsible for discipline of employees or material or, all the things that go along with being in charge on a job site.
Is that what is the next step, like a foreman position, and that's what that is?
Yeah.
Is managing the crew.
So, we have different, on the commercial side, our foremen are going to be, usually running crews of 4, 8. It goes up. It just depends on the size of the job.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they're they're the ones on site that are responsible. So if someone's not performing, they have to have a conversation with them. If that doesn't work, then one of us will get someone else, a project manager would get involved.
Yeah.
To deal with that. But they're responsible for at all parts of the job, communicating with the superintendent about schedule and needs, and we're there to assist with that and make sure that everything is staying on schedule and they're getting what they need and that their answers or their questions are getting answered.
I think there should be something for designers that's not like professional engineer, right? Because professional engineer licenses, you have to go to school for 4 years from an ABET accredited school, then get 4 years of experience through that, and then test and take the PE and get it. It's a long thing. And it would be awesome if we had something that was like a trade education version of becoming a designer, like where it includes, you know, an apprenticeship where there's field work required and you get to see it and physically do it and work and in the field somehow integrate that knowledge, but you're also focused on the software side of it and the code applications more specifically. And then you can be given, because it's highly regulated. I mean, you guys are licensed and regulated by the same folks that regulate and license us, and we have to have direct supervision and control. But kind of how there are nurses and doctor, you know, MDs.
Yeah, they got like CNA, RN.
Yeah, like we
LP,
need something
whatever.
like that on the design side where that the nurse, more boots on the ground in the hospital. They're actually often more knowledgeable generally about like what actually happens on a day-to-day basis. If we had that in the design world, I think that would improve.
Well, I mean,
quite a
even
bit.
the NCES test, you could take the test and pass the test, and you got a good understanding of electrical fundamentals and how that all works. But in the actual construction world that we're in, you could know not a damn thing. I mean, you could work automations or facility or industrial and not know a lot about the commercial world at all. Him talking about the worker, promoting a good worker, we deal with that too. It's like, what's the saying? If you promote a good engineer to project manager, you get a bad engineer. You lose a good engineer and you get a bad project manager. It's kind of true for the consulting part too, because we do the consulting engineering, and oftentimes those two skills are mutually exclusive. You could be a great engineer and understand the code and the math and the physics, but not know how to communicate like a normal human being to a client, and then they'll lose all that confidence in the company if you can't communicate it well.
Yeah, I mean that's huge for us because we have guys in the field that are great, like great foremen, but their communications there's some lacking. Some of them just don't want to deal with it. Don't want to deal with like communicating with people outside of the construction world, because they can use whatever language for the most part, whatever language they want. They don't have to kind of hold back. The personalities are similar. Whereas if you put that guy in front of a computer and make him a project manager, he's going to be hating life because he's going to want to be out there doing the stuff and
have a whole
his
lot of
hands on
broken
it.
computer monitors pretty quick.
Yeah. You probably know this just as well. I mean, tailoring how you communicate based on who it is and what the situation is a skill that I don't know if that could even be taught. It's just you have to go through it.
Yeah, I think I think it could be learned. Like if you're willing to make changes to how you communicate, I think you can teach it. But if it's someone that's not interested, then it's if they think what they're doing is perfectly fine, acceptable, and everyone needs to adapt to them, then you're not going to ever get anywhere. Yeah,
the exposure, that's key. I mean, that's not something you can be taught from like, hey, here's this meeting and it's how it went and this is why I did what it is. It's just go sit there and listen to how this goes and this is the situation. I wanted to be on every single phone call you were on. When I first started, I just wanted to get that exposure, and it was the best learning experience I think I could have ever gotten.
Even the high pressure, high stakes one, you're like, man, can I listen in on that? Trying to understand what the conflict looks like when you're having that conversation about why do I have 1,200 amps switchgear when I told you I needed 2,000 amps?
Oh boy, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. You're like, well, because you told me you needed 1,200 amps.
That's a shell, and you told me you needed that.
But where was it? Oh, so 4 years apprenticeship. What is it? Do you have to test? What is the next step if you're going into the licensing of getting the electrician's license?
Yeah, so you have to be like through that 4 years, you have to be like registered with the state as being like an actual apprentice.
Yeah.
You have to be going to a licensed school.
Yeah.
Can't just be anyone's school. It's got to be something that's licensed through the state. So they're clocking your hours for school. Your employees clocking your hours at work, and then once you meet the requirement, which I think it's 8,000 hours of on-the-job training. I don't know how many hours of schooling. I want to say it's like 800 or something, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Once you do that, once you have those two things, then you can fill out a form to take your test, and then it's just a test that you go and sit and take the test, and if you pass.
Then that's a master electrician license.
That's journeyman.
Journeyman. Okay, so then from that, how do you get the master?
So the master is you have to have another year of experience, and it's supposed to be a year of supervising other employees,
like a foreman position type thing.
Yeah, something like that, where you're not like you're the one making the decisions. You're not the one that's underneath someone every day. You're supposed to be the one that's out there doing the work, making the decisions. And then it's another test.
I mean, it would be awesome to have something just similar to that, like titles that are like the apprentice level, then the journeyman level, and then like a master designer.
Such a big gap.
Yeah, which like either you're a professional engineer or you're under a professional engineer. It's like, what the hell? That's like having no other grade of medical professional in the industry.
Yeah.
For medical, that makes no sense. And it would be nice to have something structured, somebody to come across and say, this is how we're going to structure it. And it would be a hybrid trade position with design position. You know, you're going to be a designer, but this role will require you to understand, pull some wires, pull some cables, rough in conduit, do the work a little bit here, and then read and learn the software and design. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I guess the EIT is like the intermediate step. That's still just a test. You know,
you have to have a 4-year ABET accredited degree even to get that, and it's just such a huge barrier to entry. And then our designers are either over theoretical engineers, or maybe a master electrician that just got tired of being in the field and they started designing, and then they're good at it. Like, I knew a guy at my old job, that was what he was. He was just tired of like crawling around and, you know, doing all this stuff and didn't really want to be in that world anymore. You know, he's a great designer. It'd be like you if you ever became a designer.
Well, so actually I thought about being an electrical engineer.
Oh, really?
But I was too hands-on. Like I couldn't, like sitting, doing a design, not finding out 2 years whether it worked or not. It would drive me insane. I'd be like getting on a flight, like where was it?
I mean, just today you got your ladder. You're like, screw it. I'm getting my ladder. I'm going to turn this damn heater off.
Yeah. So, you know, that's what, you know, because I was also under a lot of pressure from different people out going to college because, you know, I mean, it's 2006. So, I mean, I feel like college has changed a little bit since then. But back then, like, you know, if you wanted to be successful, you had to go to college.
Yep.
And that was a big thing. So, like, when I did well in school, like, you know, so everyone the expectation was I was going to college. And then when I, you know, went to the tech program, everyone was kind of like, oh, okay. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to even apply to a college. And they're like, well, what do you mean? And I was like, that's not for me. Like, they're like, well, how do you know? And I'm like, because I really love this.
Yeah.
So
you strike me as somebody who graduated in the top 10 of your class or something.
I don't even know. To be honest
he
with
definitely
you.
was.
Yeah. You know,
I forgot,
like never bring it up.
Valedictorian or something.
No. I definitely wasn't valedictorian or anything. But
I mean, I might have been like third. You know.
No. But anyway, so so I'm glad that, like, I think college has its place.
Yeah.
But I think exactly what we're describing here, like, how great would it be if they had 2 years of the, like, the engineering, the software training, and then 2 years of on-the-job training, like, and then they can develop the skills at the firm that they're going to work for exactly how they want their processes done. That would be an amazing engineer, you know.
Yes.
Then rather than having, you know, the plan that they have now.
Imagine if you're either a PE or a trade version designer that we're describing, you would probably see like 90% of the drawings not have that branch circuit problem we just described, right? If all the designers have roughed in branch circuits to panels and terminated on breakers and actually done that work, there's no way you would ever design it differently. But you can't. We've described so many times to junior designers, even some of the more mid-level senior designers, that just imagine yourself buying the materials and putting it in yourself.
Yeah.
Try to make it make sense, but until you do it, there's really no way you'll understand like why it doesn't make sense. You just hear your boss doing this, and it's just like, yeah, sure, boss, whatever. You're just making me do another markup. Just kidding. Our team's not like, we got a great team, but
I was talking to one of the guys when we allegedly put the circuits in my house.
Yeah.
And it was like 2 circuits, and it's an existing 200 amp panel.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. We hired a licensed professional to do it. And I was like, for us, it'd be just like a simple note, like, oh, just rip out the whole panel and replace it, you know? But from my perspective as a homeowner who allegedly had that work done, it was like, I don't know if I can do that. I got a panel right here that's like perfectly fine, but I could see in the engineering world where if it's just a couple circuits, it'd be so easy to say rip and replace for whatever reason. It's like, wow, I can find we found a breaker allegedly that would work, you know? The guy that we hired to do it did it, and it worked. And it's like, I think it clicked in his mind when we had that conversation. Like, this is a real life example of a panel here that I don't want to replace because I'm only adding 2 circuits. And we did, and it was fine.
that comes down to how expensive it is to hire an engineer for their time, versus and having them think about all of the ways you could save money on each individual connection. Because like we don't have the money to think about every little branch circuit or J box that's underneath the crawl space and be like, well, actually we could just have it here and be fine. We do a quick 1 hour survey, just generally design stuff. And then that's why it works best for design build with an electrician, where you already kind of have done all that work and have visualized how you want to approach it. And you're like, I'm going to do it this way. We say, all right, well, we'll just basically do what you said. You know, but your designs are always just so smart. But and you've made our designs better in many ways. But we don't have it in our fee to do the work that basically you do when we work together, right? Like you're thinking about how you want to approach it. So that work's done by you. And when we go design bid, there's like an expectation the engineer is thinking, has the fee to think through all of the problems that the electrician would solve in that role if it was design build. And then it just kind of doesn't really work out. I don't think design bid, I'll go ahead and say it, I don't think design bid is good in the light commercial market. It just needs to be a partnership with the electrician along the way. It just goes to hell really quick for adaptive reuse. You know, ground up, like you said, that's different.
Yeah.
You can plan it out better. We're still not the best, but you know, as engineers, but adaptive reuse, design bid, it really, like small light commercial, it just has to go that way. Start on the same page with the team early on and just say, electrician wants to approach it this way. Cool. We'll go do your code research and make sure that you're not missing anything, and to draw it, get stamps, roll.
Yeah. I think with like design, like just what you were talking about, the tough thing, and just thinking about it, like I agree, like it would be awesome. And we've done projects where it's like, hey, you know, the general contractor comes and says, hey, we've got this job. We want to work with you. We're going to negotiate this job with you. And it goes, you know, but we need some help. So sweet. So, you know, it all works out. But from an ownership standpoint, like if that was my building, it's tough because you are losing out on the open market for pricing purposes. So you're pretty much, you know, running with this team that if you don't have a really good relationship with, you could potentially open yourself up to either more issues or just like from a cost perspective, someone trying to take advantage. And I think that's part of the hang up from an ownership perspective of like, hey, yeah, that sounds really great, but
Yeah.
what if they're charging me 40% more than I could get it over here? And maybe it's not the same product, but you know, it's just a hard thing to navigate.
True. The owner experience matters, whether or not they're experienced, because then they're more likely to have trusting relationships with people already going into it that they can trust to do that kind of thing with, like you mentioned with the one. So if they're a brand new owner and they don't have the experience, they're not prepared, then they might feel more comfortable with design bid in that situation. But I would argue that, I don't know the data, so it's a totally baseless claim, that it just is going to end up being more expensive, because then you're asking everybody to go to the bottom of the barrel. And everybody's job, from a bid perspective, is to bid as cheap as possible and try to catch something on the drawings that somebody else didn't, and then change order it back up. And then at the end of the day, you're ending up with maybe a more expensive product than if you had the right design build team.
That is true. It's just it's difficult to get an owner to see it that way.
Yeah, yeah, true.
I mean, that's 100% true statement, but very difficult to relay that information in a way that makes sense, especially for someone who doesn't have that much experience with it, because they don't see it that way. They're like, oh no, we're going to get our drawings, we're going to get our bids, and we're going to build it, and there's going to be no change orders. It's like,
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Keep dreaming.
Has that ever happened in the history of construction?
I'm sure I've done jobs that don't have change orders. I mean, I don't know. To be 100% honest, I hate change orders. I despise them.
Yeah.
It's like, it almost always is an argument.
Yeah.
It's just not worth it. It's, we've gone over this in our office, and it's like we have a hard time, like, depending on the change order, something small, you don't make any money.
Yeah.
By the time I spend receiving the phone call, there's an issue, drafting an RFI, there's a problem, figuring out the solution, oh, here's your $125 change order that I just spent 4 hours on.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that didn't work out so well.
It's like, wait, you could have been bidding a new project or just doing it for free and fixing it, moving on, whatever.
Yeah, so we do a lot of that. We'll do a lot of like just, we'll just keep this project moving. We're not going to waste our time nickel and diming someone. But sometimes there are significant things that come up, and you're like, sorry, but
yeah, 12 grand is different than $125.
But in the perfect world, we would just have a job with no change orders, and it goes perfectly smoothly. And the other thing, part of that too, is the relationship, right? So you keep going back to someone, and back to them, and back to them. it just doesn't ever end up, you know, you might make money, but you may have lost a relationship or something. And it may not be your fault, and it may be legitimate, but
Yeah.
Yeah, the political backlash, it's hard to even put a price on that.
Yeah.
Like if you made money but lost a good relationship or soured a good one, it's just never worth it.
We struggle in in those moments to decide, are we training somebody to just take advantage of us and just keep getting the free stuff? Is it worth it to you know what I mean? Like there's two sides of that. It's like one, you keep giving the free, and then it's never perceived as or it's never appreciated, but then it's expected. And now suddenly you expect me to be cheap and give you free change orders along the way. So that's one world, but the other world is what you're saying is if you go after every single change order, then that person just not going to bring you back in, and then they can tell their friends that, oh, they just change order the hell out of you. They're just going to this and that, and it's tough, man, managing that.
yeah, it is. I mean, it's a fine line because I think you are right. Like, you know, oh, we didn't charge me for that on the last project.
Yeah,
Well, you're right, but
you're welcome.
Yeah.
here we are making the same mistake again.
Yeah, that's good. Man, so many different political challenges that come in, and that's why the coordination is the main topic for us, because it ultimately is because change orders are politically challenging. So we're just trying to understand, get to the root cause of them, or at least talk about what leads to them. And I think often I think it's an expectation management thing early on with the owners about what they're getting into. You know, it's adaptive reuse with historic tax credit implications. Be ready for some big contingencies. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with that. It really just is very project specific as to what issues you may or may not run into, and then how much money. Like I think you kind of hit on it before. Like how much money do you want to spend on on coordination? Like, do you want to spend, 25% of your total design cost on coordination, and that maybe that equates to 10 grand, or do you want to roll the dice and say, hey, this isn't 100%, it's close, and maybe you end up with a $2,000 change order.
Yep.
But you don't know. You can't have it both ways. You can't,
Yeah, exactly.
you can't have really high expectations with a low cost and then expect there to be no change orders. It's one way or another they're going to probably end up paying some money.
Yeah.
For unforeseen things.
Yes, that is so true. The same is with HVAC when people devalue engineer, and they remove features from the HVAC thinking that it's saving money, and then I try to say, well, what it comes down, if I were to boil down what value engineering in HVAC is, it is removing the feature, removing the capability of removing moisture from the air. Because not everything is built to actually dehumidify the space. When you have a lot of people and a lot of fresh air you have to bring in, you're bringing a lot of moisture in that air, and it's expensive and more complicated to remove it. So making it cheaper is basically taking that feature away, which means you've created a giant mold petri dish in the building, because now you're just dumping moisture into the building that you can't remove. And it's uncomfortable, it leads to problems. And if it's too bad, all the laminate flooring will come up off the, it'll destroy the investment. And so that's what value engineering in HVAC looks like. So I try to use fear tactics and just say, do you really want to spend $3 million only to have in 2 years this whole thing just be destroyed from the inside out? Or maybe you can talk to Ben and he can get you 40 grand off that lighting package that's $200,000. Keep it in the HVAC. It's a permanent installment. Do it the right way, but it's a management of expectations things early on. We have a project for a restaurant that just kicked off. The GC is like design assist, which is great. Because now I can tell that to him, like when this goes out to bid, like just be prepared. I'm going to design it this way for this reason. It's going to be probably more expensive than you think, but the owner and the GC was there. So I was able to say, it's because of what you told me you want to do in this space. I'm not over engineering it. When these prices come in, and they will be very expensive, it's because you've described you want these things. So speak now or forever hold your peace, because I'm going to charge to redesign this. If you think it's over designed, and everybody's like, cool. Now that's like recorded Zoom meeting. Like that's as best you can do in that moment.
Yeah.
To try to like prepare, because we've seen it 1,000 times, the redesign. Like you said, you spend probably 90% of your life on lighting packages trying to make them work.
I don't know about 90%.
What do you think is the most common thing people skip out on for electrical that they probably shouldn't? Electrical is pretty straightforward. Is there such a thing, or do you see owners?
I don't know. That's a tough one. I think that is also something that's like very, very project specific.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, a lot of I would say the biggest hang up or the funniest comment that we get is, oh, just put the outlets in per code.
Yeah.
Okay, you just told me you wanted one outlet no matter how big the building is underneath the panel.
Yeah, real
No,
quick.
no, we don't want that.
Can you walk, for us, we just laugh, but for those listening, can you kind of describe why that's something we would laugh at?
Yeah, sure. So in the residential world, the electrical code lays out everywhere where you need an outlet. In some places, you don't need outlets. In the commercial world, there really is no code requirement. It's just whatever's on the drawings. So if you're working on a commercial project and they say, oh, we want these outlets per code in our office, I think what they're expecting is to get whatever they would have in their house, which is way too much for a commercial space.
Yeah.
But in reality, what they're asking for is the minimum code requirement, which is one outlet below the service. No matter how big the building is, it doesn't matter.
Oh, and there's one on the same level of the HVAC too.
Well, that is true. If they had HVAC, you'd have to put an outlet there too.
Are there any other actual requirements?
I think no.
The only other thing I think is required is if it exists, then some need to be GFI.
Yeah.
But only if it's there near a sink or something, or in a garage or whatever.
I have that conversation talking about expectation management for commercial. It's I can try to lay out, I can do a pretty good job at laying out these outlets because we've done dozens of these types of projects, whatever it is. But if you have a specific receptacle layout in mind based on how you want to use the space, you need to tell me, because otherwise I'm just going to be doing a best guess and there's no code requirement in a commercial space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's always a fun one. And then no matter what you lay out, they're like, nah, we don't want it there. That would be stupid. Why would you put one there? And it's like,
well, you should have told me.
I was going to ask, do you do the layouts or do you usually ask for them?
It really just depends. If there's nothing, and we do that a lot. A lot of times I'll just send a little markup and be like, hey, what do you guys think about this?
Yeah.
Here's your chance to put these outlets wherever you want. But
yeah. Sometimes I guess it can be helped to preempt them because an owner may not know what they don't know and how to even start that. So if you give them at least a little sketch to start the conversation, be like, we normally put this at every computer, a little data, empty data box plus a quad or whatever it is. And then that can feed them what you're looking for. And then just say, from here on out though, need you to tell me the rest because I'm not your business. That's where we are. It's I don't run your business. So you have to visualize using it and where are you going to want to plug the stuff in because there's no code requirement.
Mm-hmm.
Simply not.
TVs, cameras. I tried to give
there's
them
one in
list,
here. We almost were like, wait, shit, should we put electrical receptacle in this one?
We designed this place.
But yeah, but other things as far as lacking, I don't know. I mean, it really depends on, I think, just the building. If it's an office building, I think sometimes I would change mine to not what's lacking, but what is overthought. And that's back to controls. You'll talk to someone oh, well, we want 37 switches. Well, you only have 4 lights. Yeah. Well, we want different moods and we want different things. And then, 6 months later, you're ripping it all out because no one understands how any of it works.
Yeah.
And so, after 10 service calls of hey, my lights aren't coming on. It's well, did you press the switch over here? We didn't even know that was there. It's
yeah.
Well, that's what you told us you guys wanted.
Especially if it's specialized controllers somewhere and it needs to be programmed or something.
Yeah, people way overthink it. I'm just think about it this way. When you come in the office, just have one button to switch on your lights.
Yeah.
We don't, in the conference room, you can dim your lights down, maybe with some different settings. But for the general rule, just have the lights turn on.
Yeah. Because people get confused very quickly. Mm-hmm. Conference rooms, if they have more than 3 buttons that are preset, my wife will be calling me hey, Kenny, we need an AV tech here. I was an AV tech for one of her homeschooling nonprofit things. And I was basically going into the conference rooms and telling them what button to push and just plugging an HDMI cable like that. They needed an AV tech for that. That's how easy it is for most people to get confused that it's just more complicated. Yeah. This level of setup versus, and if you make the interface too complicated, it's going to be that way. People won't even use it.
We talked about that on a Mission Lane job a while back with the same sensor can be an occupancy mode or vacancy mode. So when they go in their office, the lights cut on when it senses motion, but in some spaces it's manual on, auto off.
Yeah, well, whenever that code starts, it's going to be terrible.
Wait, I think it's supposed to be that. Isn't that already what the code says? Because we've read it a few times. It's supposed to be manual on, auto off.
Yeah, well, when there's more than one light zone in the room, that's when it gets confusing.
Oh. Because
because you got like different controls in the same. It was something about a light in a conference room. It was maybe like a decorative light, so it didn't need to be on occupancy control or something. But it got like exponentially more confusing whenever there was more zones.
I just
with
think
the same requirement.
I thought under occupant sensor control
It
that
is
it's
supposed
described as manual on and auto off.
to be. Yeah, except for like stairwells and restrooms,
Yeah.
corridors, I think.
But
Yeah.
everybody installs them
But
with
it's-
auto on when they get installed, don't they? Usually.
Yeah, because if you don't do that, you get a call. Hey, when I walk in the room, my light doesn't come on. Press the button. Okay, well, it's supposed to be an occupancy
Press the
sensor. I'm not
button.
supposed to press the button.
It's
Occupant.
occupant. Yeah, it senses. It can sense you. It senses when you're gone. It should be called vacancy.
Well, that is what they call for, but
Yeah.
it's easier just to do it auto on, manual off. Or it could be auto on, auto off.
Well, one vacancy sensor application that makes a lot of sense is a lot of glazing on all the offices as you walk down the corridor. So it doesn't light up like a refrigeration aisle in a grocery store when you just walk down the offices.
False alarms.
Yeah, there's a co-working space I was in there saying this drives us crazy because every time we walk down the corridor, everybody's offices are turning on, you know. But vacancy sensor would solve that problem. But, you know, I guess it's not as bad as switch receptacles though.
Yeah.
Little things like wiring on, I think this came from you, the 8 systems furniture, doing the handle tie stuff. Those things come up when we work with the trades. That a designer wouldn't just be something you learn. And when you do, you don't really understand like what they even mean. You learn it in the sense that my company taught me to draw this little symbol over these like 4 breakers and say handle tie or whatever. You don't understand how that's being terminated. Like, another perfect reason why we should have the designers doing some sort of trade school work, you know. Install a damn thing.
Well, and all of that is challenging too because it depends on the systems furniture that they get.
Yeah. Oh god, systems furniture. Talk about coordination. That one.
Yeah. It's
Oh man.
It's like the systems furniture, like 9 times out of 10, it's not even there when they want to get their final inspection. It's like, well, I don't know what to tell you. They're not, you know.
What's the best approach when you don't know, but somebody wants you to build something for what may or may not be systems furniture? What do you do?
So I would say 2 pole breakers because you're sharing a neutral between. You have 4 circuits, 2 neutrals, so you're sharing. We would assume that you're sharing a neutral between 2 of the 4 circuits.
Because I mean, worst case scenario, you could turn that into receptacles if they weren't actually installing systems furniture anyway. Like if that happened.
Multi-wire branch circuit.
Yeah, that should be. We should always do that. Multi-wire branch circuit out to where a cluster of desks may be. That way they could terminate it with a whip on real systems furniture, 8-wire or whatever it is. And then the isolated ground that they find.
I mean, that there's very rare times that like isolated ground is usually like what we do is like if they have a generator, it's getting tied to the generator circuit.
Yeah.
Like it's not really being used as a true isolated ground. It's really just like a dedicated, you know, or if they have like a dedicated copier that they want to have in that section, we're using it for like very specific, unique things that, you know, come up.
It's weird. I don't even know the real practical application of it. I've never heard of an office having issues with not using isolated ground on other computers in practical applications.
Yeah, I haven't either. Usually the only time we see isolated ground is like a lot of banks push it. Some of the like chain, not chain, but like kind of restaurants will have it for their cash registers and stuff. So it's probably a little overkill.
Yeah.
But that's usually where we see it.
So I asked you what engineers mess up in this part. What makes a good set of engineering drawings and a good engineer to work with?
I think those are 2 different things.
Yeah, let's start with one. What makes a good set of drawings?
So a good set of drawings is just clear direction on whatever the intent is. What I'd say would be one thing. And the second thing is having the information on one page that relates to whatever it is that you're looking at. Like from an estimating and from an install standpoint, if I've got to look through like 6 pages to find the information, it ain't happening.
Yeah.
Like it's just not. So, you know, if you have a like, you know, pretty common, you'll have like notes. Put the notes for that page on that page. Don't make like a title sheet with notes. So then I have to like flip from page 3 back to page 1, back to, you know.
And the light fixture schedule is like on a different page too.
Yeah, I mean, the light fixture schedule, that's helpful to have like on the lighting page. But if you have multiple pages of lights, then, you know, having that on one spot is kind of normal. But it's like the notes or another thing that I've started to see is like if they have like a bunch of different switches, they'll have like tags for the switches, and having that on a separate page. It's just anytime you have to flip back and forth
Yeah.
for estimating, but especially in the field, stuff's going to get missed.
Yeah.
Just because the information should just be simple and all on one page, and keeping symbols consistent. Maybe not across engineers, that'd be awesome, but that'll never happen. But keeping them consistent across the drawing and making sure that all of the symbols are labeled.
Yeah.
Because like there's at least one symbol on every single drawings we look at where it's like, what is that? Well, check this electrical legend. Still don't know. That doesn't help me. It's not there.
Yeah.
So
It's
then
got
we're
everything
guessing.
but that. It's like got 50 things not used.
Yeah. So then we're just guessing. Like, what is that? What could that mean? And then, anyways. So I'd say those are like the big items. And then I'd say another huge one is what we see a lot of is having your one-line drawing, which shows all the panels and the feeders match your panel schedules.
Yeah.
That's huge because you'll be like,
It's
it's a 200 amp panel on the one line and it's a 100 amp panel on the panel schedule.
Yeah.
Or they're showing it as main circuit breaker here and MLO here.
Yeah.
And so you really, at that point, you don't know what to do.
It also makes me wonder, why is it even on the panel schedule anyway? If it's going to be information specified on the single line, why not just not say it on the panel?
I mean, most panel schedules will say like, it's a 200 amp main circuit breaker panel,
Yeah, it just makes me wonder, why? Could you just put it on the single line and just not even have that on the panel schedule? Or do you guys use it when pricing the panel schedule itself? I mean, to avoid the conflict.
If you said C1 line, then sure.
Yeah.
We've been doing that with our like ASC rating. Instead of, there was a spot to put it on the panel schedule, we'll just put CSLD, because sometimes that'll change. And then it's tough to remember to change it in the panel schedule.
At least confusion.
But so if you're going to have the same information in two places, make sure it matches.
Yeah, that's good.
The one line to the panel schedules is something that comes up very often.
That's good. Also, it's tough. In the mechanical world, we get access to the reps that sell the equipment a lot easier than in the electrical world. I've been told by some of the reps, unless I have a purchase order, I won't really help you with it. And so I think it could be helpful if we had the rep involved in the way that they do get involved in mechanical. Like before SD, I'm already talking to reps about, hey, what kind of equipment do you think would work here? Is this stuff, is this a good application, or should I go here or there? I mean, I know one guy, Jeff, he was on the podcast. The 11 o'clock guy in Chicago. He, he's super smart. He said he reps over 50 brands. So he just has a library of stuff that he can help me work through and design. But in the electrical side, we don't have that similar support. I know it's a little bit simpler, but there's so much about like what can and can't be done with just say an I-line panel. What kind of breaker can fit in the main section or not. And we'll just say, I guess it can get a 1200 amp main breaker in here, but that changes the construction to where then whatever breakers you can fit up here won't work.
Yeah.
If we're not talking to them, we're just drawing it in this theoretical world, and it just, then you're looking at it like, well, shit, now I got to basically try to get a custom build to meet the intent, and it's not buildable with them.
Yeah, I don't have a great answer for you on that one, unfortunately. I don't know. I mean, the gear world is so crazy that honestly, it's probably better if you just stay out of it, because if you guys pick something that's got some super long lead time, they're going to be blaming you for that. And
Yeah.
So
what is it like in the gear world from your perspective, trying to coordinate a purchase? What's that process look like? Is it easy? A headache?
It just depends. A lot of it has to come down to like the specs that were provided. Like I did a job where they had a very low budget, and they wanted a I can't remember what the amp. I think it was like a 1200 amp switchgear. Was what was on the specs. It was like spec'd out. And it was like $45,000, and I was like, it's like 25% of the budget for the entire building.
Jeez.
Like we can't do this. And so I sent an RFI in, and I was like, hey, can we simplify this? Can we just do a switchboard? Like, can we just like 1200 amps? Like this will be like $5,000. Save them $40,000. And the response that came back was, well, yeah, sure, that's code compliant, but that doesn't meet our spec. We're specing something of what we think the client needs, and blah 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, but you're just not taking into account their need of a budget.
Why would they need a switchgear in that application instead of?
I can't answer that. I have no idea.
Were they expecting some large amount of future distribution of?
No.
Yeah, I mean, what would be your reasoning for switchgear versus a switchboard? I remember as an early engineer, I was confused as hell what that meant and realized I guess it basically comes down to construction. But from a practical design,
So
aspect-
ampacity is really what drives it. So once you go over 1200 amps, you're in switchgear.
okay,
territory.
it just
Like,
it just takes into a bigger construction
Yeah.
form factor.
because it can't fit all the bus and everything that you need. The size of the bus just gets too big to fit into a panel board.
Yeah.
But beyond that, there's not really a.
I mean, the bus is a nice size in this switchboards.
Decent, like
Yeah.
average.
But
Um,
yeah,
so I mean, that's really what. But I mean, so in that case, that engineer got so mad that he decided that he wasn't going to redraw the drawings, even though we'd saved him saved the client a lot of money. So we called Permit Zip, and Permit Zip redrew the drawings.
Yeah. I don't even like to say I pride ourselves in that because I think that should just be somewhat normal. But it's like if you've got an idea for something that's legal and that will work, and that meets the intent roughly of what we think will work, I don't have a problem with that at all. Like copper or aluminum, I really could give two shits. I mean, if it works, right?
Yeah.
Unless there's some other weird, like it's an existing conduit, it might be bigger. Thankfully, Ben thinks through those things before we even think about it. But I don't get it. I mean, not to try to throw anyone else under the bus, but if it works, it's fine with me.
Well-
Yeah, I mean, that guy just. I mean, he already had a design, had his fee done, so I guess he didn't really care in the end. But it just wasn't a very good. I'm like, it's a no-brainer. Like, well,
Yeah.
we can pay a small fee to get the drawings redone, save $40,000.
Yeah.
They're still ahead by a lot.
yeah. I think our fee actually for that just changed to $40,000 or so. I think.
How much was it changing?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Speaking of fee, we've been working on our instant quote a whole lot.
Yeah.
So if you use our instant quote in the past couple months, it's probably been really high.
Yeah.
Really, really high.
Yeah.
I noticed that. I've cut some of your numbers in my bids just so you guys know, because
That's
Oh,
fine.
yeah. We were way off, but we fixed that. So
We're adjusting them, so we're trying to also get more folks to use a new version, and we've gone through some iterations of the algorithm and just trying to tune it in to be a little more adaptive. For example, on the lower side of the square footage, we have a curve that allows us to have like a higher cost per square foot that transitions as you get further down to be
Yeah.
lower square foot
Makes
for
sense.
warehouse application. Took us a while to kind of tune that though. Like it was getting a little, it's like training a model or something, in AI world. It's like it gets to give funny results at first and some projects come out way too high and like, oh, fuck, you fix it. But we're getting pretty close to a pretty decent model. So get out there and use it and give us some feedback because we're really trying to get back to getting that to be a useful tool for folks, simplify it. And then what you'll find is you will be able to customize more powerfully. You'll be able to like get more details or features, but you can still get the same feature. Simple square foot punch. It'll be some assumptions under the hood about what that means. It will tell you about them, and then you can customize and refine those. Restaurant, let's say, for example, we'll assume that it's approximately this like 25% of it is the kitchen and 75% is the rest of the restaurant.
Mhm.
And if it's going to be 100% kitchen, like a cloud kitchen or something, then you can change that. It would make it significantly more expensive, but you'll be able to kind of refine it, give more features. So let us know. Use it. Give us
Yeah,
some
I'll give it a
feedback on the
shot.
new one. But what was that? Where were we talking about? Oh, what makes a good engineer?
So I think, I mean, we've talked about this a little bit too, but like just being able to have a conversation where we're both going towards the goal of getting the project done and doing it in a way that everyone, including the customer, is happy. We're not driving costs up. We're not doing stuff that we don't need to do. But being able to have that conversation with the engineer, either through phone call or emails or whatever, formal RFIs, but just having them be receptive to maybe a different idea than whatever they put on their plans is huge. Because, I mean, like I already mentioned, but like some engineers just really get offended when you have a different idea of how to do something. And
Yeah.
it makes it really hard to work with someone who like has got their heels dug in on something that could be costly or could be something really simple. And some engineers have no desire to talk at all.
it's crazy.
Like they don't want to get on the phone. They don't want to, they're like, send me an RFI.
I'd rather get on the phone.
Okay. So
Yeah.
then you describe it and they're like, we don't understand what you're talking about. Try again. And I'm like,
Can I explain it to you on the phone call?
want to draw you a picture? Do you want to meet on site? So I think the biggest thing is just having someone that's willing to communicate and work together on finding solutions and not just, either place blame or absolve themselves of blame.
Yeah, that's that. It is such a litigious industry, and so it becomes that real quick where everybody's covering their ass and nobody wants to make a decision because they're afraid by saying anything you start to be like sound like the guy that did it wrong or whatever. And let's say I'm the engineer and you say that, then it could be perceived like if I allow this, then is my credibility going to be jeopardized as a professional? Is my client going to think I should never have designed it this way? Whereas we usually try to preempt that always at the very, very beginning of the show and just say, can you get somebody out there like a Ben, like, can we go design, build rather, or at least have a GC have pre-construction with us on the design phase so that we can lean on their relationships, to get something that's going to be less likely to be a switchgear that should have just been a switchboard. Sometimes it's just the engineer doesn't even think about the 40,000. Well, not sometimes, all the time. We're so disconnected to real cost.
Yeah.
It's just a decision, no switchgear. And then when it gets called out, maybe, I don't know this engineer, maybe they just don't want to accept it because it may jeopardize the perception of their, I guess, professional prowess or whatever.
Yeah, I don't, I have no idea what is going through their heads. But
Well, at the HJs, that can happen too. When you get into a disagreement with them, like you just kind of be like, all right, sure, you win. Because
well, they just have that's just how it goes.
Yeah.
But with engineers, like working together to find a solution is always good. Or even if I see something, I try to call it out. To try and avoid, like, hey, your door swings the wrong way in the electrical room, and they're like, "What do you mean?" And I'm like, "Well, it's a 1,200 net piece of gear. It's got to swing out." And they're like,
yeah.
"Okay, yeah, well, what happened was," and I'm like, "Man, just fix it. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not busting your balls here. I'm just trying to help you, help us get the job done, so that we're not walking away, getting a final inspection. Electrical inspector goes to leave the electrical room and is like, oh, I got to flip this around, and then it's a whole thing, like, because that can happen."
There's a contingency for a reason, and it goes back to, I think, educating the owner. The more experienced developers know that this happens, and it's less of an issue because they just know that there's no way to get a perfectly executed project, especially at a certain scale of it.
Yeah.
Things are going to happen, and it should be baked into the construction project. Otherwise, I mean, how can somebody be accountable for the near impossible complexity of a construction job? We talked about it with Charlie. It's almost a miracle anything even gets built.
Yeah.
Considering the constraints all the way as early as where they are in the land development process, just getting something approved through zoning or making sure the soil's been tested or whatever the hell goes on there. I'd like to talk to civil people. But if you're lucky enough to get through that whole process, then you got to get through the next gauntlet, get a design, get the funding, the underwriting, all the people on board, the partners, the construction team, a GC that you trust or not, a designer you can. And then finally, if you're lucky, you get Ben on the job. And it's going to be an awesome ass design, with permits that have been, Metro Electric rocking, but mostly Ben. We just do what he says. But it's crazy just how much has been done before we even get there, and then the complexity doesn't stop; it just keeps going. And then a door swing has to be swapped out, so there's probably change order fatigue that gets tiring all the way through the end, and then unfortunately, sometimes it turns into a shit show.
Yeah. Sometimes it does, but
Yeah.
try not to let it get that far.
Yeah,
This was caught in pre-construction, so nothing had been built or ordered yet. So.
Yeah, that's
Beautiful.
great. Yeah, we try to do that. But it's gonna happen. If sprinkler shows up and then a ductwork goes through and things just have to be done. And Armit's good at this approach, is just being willing to just go ahead and start talking about solutions right away. Just got to. Otherwise, the whole project gets held up, and it's just more frustrating.
Yeah. Well, and the bottom line is that we all make mistakes.
Yeah.
Every one of us makes mistakes, and it's not okay. I mean, it's not. I mean, it is what it is. Like, it would be awesome if no one made mistakes, but that's not the world we live in. So make a mistake. Let's all work together to fix it. Doesn't I mean, in the end, there could be some money involved, and you'll figure that out. But it happens.
Yeah.
Like, I don't. I'd rather be on a team that has a mentality of let's work through the issues and find the best solutions than someone who's just, placing blame and doesn't want to talk about it. And it just makes the job harder.
When you got in, and we're close to time here, but just one more question. When you got into this, when you fell in love with the trade school and you described that experience, how close is what you're doing now to what you started falling in love with, like, in the industry?
So, I mean, I'm not as hands-on anymore. I usually get, like, things that need to be worked out is my only like hands-on experience. Like, hey, we just can't figure this out. Can you come help us or whatever? Stuff like that. Weird stuff. So it's changed and evolved, but I've also changed and evolved as a person and what I want to do. So now on the side of things, like I'm obviously in the estimating side of things and the project manager side of things, but also on the employee side of things, like, working with everyone in our company. And so I don't know. I mean, I'd say it's very different. Like obviously when I first started out green apprentice, not knowing really hardly anything, to where I am now is completely different, but I do enjoy the evolution and where I've come and where I am now. Like I really like I don't know that I wouldn't be as content as doing what I was doing. That's why I made a change and kind of moved into the role, and that role has changed as we've gotten bigger and we've brought more people on and had different needs and different things that it's always evolving, always changing. So
yeah, a lot of people are uncomfortable with the change from hands-on, like you described earlier, to getting into the management role or the people role. And like, I didn't want to manage people. I wanted to build these things, use my hands. So I think you're definitely gifted with it, with the soft skills required to be in the kind of role that you're in. We still don't know if it could be trained or not. Like, or if it's just some people have it, some people don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think it does boil down to, I think you either have it or you don't, or you are really interested in it and something that you really desire to have. Like I do think talking with people, there's no substitute for experience. Like, walking away from, and I've had to call people back and be like, hey, listen, I didn't handle myself very well there.
Yeah,
I would apologize because that wasn't appropriate. I shouldn't have said what I said in the way that I said it or whatever. Like I just, things got out of hand. I'm really sorry. Like,
yeah.
But you learn from that, and then you try not to do that again. And you can also try to head that off too. Some conversations, if you can tell everyone poor, like, hey man, like, let's talk about this in a couple hours. Like, you just call me back when you're calmed down. Like, this isn't a big deal. We're gonna work through this. There's no there's a problem, but we're gonna find a solution.
Yeah.
Just calm down and call me back.
Yep.
And that usually goes a long way whenever you're dealing with someone who is really upset about something, and it's very important to them. And so we're not saying it's not important. We're just saying we want to talk about this when we're both in the headspace to have worthwhile conversation.
That emotional intelligence, I would never have ever in my life thought how important that would be in a career. Just never would have crossed my mind that it's fundamentally the most important thing to learn how to get under control, how to de-escalate, how to get like you described, if somebody else is getting out of control, how to just say, you know what, let's just give it a couple of minutes and come back. Let's all take a breather or whatever it is. Or if you notice yourself getting there, find a way to calm. We say one of our mantras we've been talking about is never assume malice. Just when you see an email that just looks like it's just in the moment, just pisses you off, just never assume malice. Maybe you're just completely misreading it. It's probably the case. Maybe pick up the phone and just start with a friendly approach, no matter how fucked up that email sounded. Because most of the time it leads to, oh man, I really did read that wrong, and I could have let that get out of hand real quick.
Email is one of those things where it's like, it's an awesome tool, just like a lot of the technology and stuff we have where you're not, whether it's email or Procore or whatever tool that's being used to communicate with, but the being able to actually talk to someone, we're lacking that. And it's great because you can get a lot done, and you don't have to spend the time on the phone. You can be very direct and get your stuff out there. But it's so much of your communication is actually perceived through your tone, through your body language. That is very easy to send an email that is received completely the wrong way from how you actually meant it, just because you were going fast and you were getting things done, and you were, checking stuff off your list, and then you look back and you're like, oh yeah, no, that was terrible. I should not have said that way.
Or we wrote an email. We even used GPT to help us get the tone right, because we were trying to help out this church and this pastor. She was frustrated and everything. We were trying to say, it was a metering thing, 220/87 stuff where they needed to do the metering and all that, and they're trying to avoid it, and we were just trying to help out. And we tried, Carter and I spent a lot of time trying to write this email to be helpful.
2 hours.
Yeah. We were like, all right, how can we do this? Because we don't want to sound like pretentious engineers. It's required. I think, how can we be helpful and give them the next steps? And we wrote it. And then I called her to follow up, and she said, well, y'all's email was so pretentious.
We were trying to explain.
Damn it.
Trying to explain to her why it was needed. And I guess they came across as like know-it-all. Like there's no winning.
Yeah.
You know? And the other side of that is,
know it all.
you know, contract you guys on the phone, send off a quick email on your phone or whatever, and it's short and sweet and to the point, which I love. You know, I've started to take that approach recently, but that can come across as like, oh, well, he's being short, or he's pissed off. And it's like, no, he just told you what exactly it's right there in the email.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I found that like if you have to spend 2 hours drafting an email, you need to make the phone call.
We could have just picked up the call that whole time and been done in 10 minutes.
Yeah. So I don't know if there's really like a number of words cut off or something, but there should be on emails, because it's like sometimes this is not information that's going to be received correctly. Maybe you follow up with an email. Hey, here's a recap of what we just talked about.
That's the best approach. Yeah.
Here's all the information that we just said, and But yes, email and other nonverbal communication is productive, but can lead to other challenges.
I'm glad you said that. We've made that assessment recently because we've been trying to figure out pricing, what to include, what not to include in our services. And we used to be really strict about whether or not we attend meetings. And we then realized, you know what, that's probably the most important thing to be doing, because it saves us the most time. In a 10-minute meeting, even if it's an hour-long meeting that maybe feels like a waste of time, if we didn't do that meeting, we'd probably spend 15 hours doing something that we could have just saved by being on the meeting, just talking to people. So we are really trying to change that. And my theory is that when you're on the 1 hour meeting with the client, you are both spending your time, the most precious resource, together. They're not going to value the 15 hours that you did on some sketch or this or that. There just doesn't exist to them. And so then it leads to resentment. I think like, well, we spent all this time and you still don't like the idea. Whereas we could just have this riff, talk, build the trust, build a relationship, and then next it makes the emails quicker. Yeah. Now you know who I am, that kind of thing. We're trying, we just, like everybody, we're just trying to develop and learn ourselves. This whole thing has been awesome for us to just get really crazy different perspectives. We're a lot more connected with you and what we do, but when we talk to the land use people or the developers directly, I'd love to get lenders, educators, just any part of the industry. And then also, I'll go ahead and say, when we do this, and you should be on it, we want to do a series where we go to the trade schools, I think I told you, where we do a decathlon, where the engineers try to install some conduit or something, try to bend some conduit and install it against the trades, and then they just like school us, and then we can do a code quiz. And if we lose at both, then like we're just gonna have to throw in the towel and just agree that engineers shouldn't exist.
Start just playing Zelda full time. Forget about this. Leave this all behind us.
Well, I mean, to be fair, you should also probably pull out some like CAD or Revit or something and be like, hey, just draw, put these one outlets in the switch and the light in the room.
Yeah, there you go.
And they're sitting there like, as I've pulled, like, I'm like, I don't even know how to, I don't even know how to open this. Like what I got the file open, but
draft a single line. There you go.
That's all I got.
Design a 1200, like a narrative of what to design, and go ahead and draft the single line and specify it, and then do that. And you have like 120 seconds to get done, something simple. Same thing with these. That'd be fun. Just to kind of see, just to show with a fun kind of competitive way of where the strengths really are. Because I think that's what's being missed, is just acknowledging the strengths are different, and we just need to lean in on them.
Yeah.
Just use that. But anyhow, Ben, this has been a really good podcast. A lot of fun. We could talk about this forever, but I guess some electricity has to be installed in this world. We got to get back to it. We appreciate it, man. Ben Matthews, Metro Electric, showing the permits at the room that we, aka Ben, designed and installed. This giant warehouse.
Chesterfield. Shout out to Arco as well.
Oh yeah.
Arco Design Bill.
Yep. See y'all next time.
All right.